everyone. I'm Alessio Laiso. I am a staff product designer at Hotjar, which is the leading global user insights platform. I'm originally from Italy, but I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal. Just a little bit of background about me. To give you some context as to why I'm talking about this, I started my career in working at an agency in Rome. It was called Vertigo Design. And then in 2014, I moved to Austria, where I was working on fitness consumer apps for mobile at Adidas Fantastic. Then, among other roles that I've had, I worked at IBM in the largest IBM design studio in Europe, in Dublin. And also working in one of the largest design organizations in the global tech scene. And when I moved to Lisbon, I worked at Zalando, which is Europe's biggest online fashion store. So 9 to 5, I'm a product designer, but I also design fonts. So I'm a type designer. Some of my fonts include Aleo, which is an open source design, which is available now on Google Fonts. It was launched 10 years ago in 2013 and is now served over 30 million times per week. And then in 2017, I launched the Lagu family. And in 2020, I launched Pani Sans, which you will see used throughout most of this presentation. And I've also done some client work for custom fonts and personalized fonts. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about how essentially we live in an age where digital products look more and more alike. Too many digital products today look refined, clean, but also kind of bland and boring. And we have some examples here. We are losing the sense of personality in the products that we build. Systems and data are helpful in building good products, but too often we forget that we are making products for people, not machines. We all know what a good login screen or form should look like and do. We created the best practices over the last 10 years. And remember when we used to argue about hamburger menus and what kind of navigation we should use? Now, all of these rules have kind of been written. And while it's true that we do not need to reinvent the wheel and spend countless hours on simple tasks, it does often feel like we have refined our user interfaces so much that, like refined corn syrup, they're sweet, but also very bland and generic. Of course, we do have some great examples of personable products. And what do I mean by personable products? I mean products that have a distinctive tone, voice, style, products that reflect the values and personality of the brand and the users that use these apps or software. These are products that are not only functional, but also memorable, delightful, and make the user want to come back. So the key takeaways that I want you to take from this presentation at the end, I would like for you all to understand the value of personality in digital products and be equipped to advocate for it. I will be addressing the topic from multiple angles, and this talk is meant as a bit of a provocation to put forward a conversation that I'm confident will be more prevalent in the next few years as design practices keep maturing. As we start, I also would like to thank and credit some of the people that I've talked to prepare for this presentation, who offered great insights and various points of view. So how did we even get here? How do we get to a world of bland digital products? The most visual aspects of the product design profession today are underrepresented in today's tech scene. And this is due to a few key factors. I will simplify and generalize a little bit for this next couple of slides, but I do think that the fundamentals are true. So one of them is related to the key disciplines, if you want, of design. I'm talking about UI and visual design, UX design, and user research. About a decade ago, when design thinking and user-centered design weren't as commonly talked about as today, most designers who landed a job in tech were coming from a more traditional design background. So this counts graphic design, industrial design. So this led to a generation of designers that were very strong when it came to the visual side of things, the craft if you want, but had to catch up when it came to user research and UX. Now, over the years, product designers have started coming from different backgrounds, including business and psychology, as well as short bootcamp style courses, which focus mostly on design thinking and user-centered design. So what this led to was pushing the market almost toward the other extreme, where designers rightly value user-centered methodologies, but are weak when it comes to the fundamentals of visual design, and that's a problem. These things, combined also with a severe underappreciation of visual design, in the conversation that designers not only have with other stakeholders and teammates, but even among designers, make it so that the skills and the quality of visual design work tends to go down. And when you're interviewing for a design job, it's kind of an unspoken rule that especially if the interviewer is not a designer and they ask, what's your best skill? What are you very good at? You almost cannot say that it's UI. You have to focus on business, user research, problem solving, otherwise you risk being labeled as a pixel pusher. And then we end up with designers who feel like, in this quote from a product designer at a SaaS company I talked to, who said, sometimes I spend more time in Confluence than in Figma, and I see myself more as a PM. But if that's what we end up doing, the explorative side of design is left to die. A second factor is kind of the structure of tech companies. Which are often dominated by engineering, because engineering teams are usually the largest in number, and they also have the most mature processes. For example, most companies use Kanban or Scrum, they work in sprints. All of these processes are typically modeled around the needs of engineering teams. And so sometimes designers in this way can be overwhelmed when taking decisions that oftentimes involve compromises. And while it's true that designers certainly benefit from a better understanding of engineering and technology and business, sometimes designers are poorly equipped to discuss the value of design itself. And so we end up with designers who will focus on the problem-solving aspects of design, which is good, but will not see that other side, which is about having a more distinctive, delightful experience. And that's a problem. So we're talking about why many products today are not personable, but why is personality important in the first place? And let's take a step back from software for a moment. Let's think, for example, about the fashion industry. Different brands might be selling products that have a similar material quality, but may charge very different amounts because of brand prestige, allure, or how distinctive the garment looks. And similar for fragrances. Everything revolves about how the brand communicates the experience. It's a liquid with alcohol and some chemicals in it in a colorful bottle, but really we're buying the experience of wearing a fragrance and how that makes the person feel. And the car industry is a great example as well. These 4 cars by Ford, Fiat, and Lancia, they share the same engines, the same platform. They're even made by in the same place here in Poland. However, they are differentiated by their different looks and personality, and they are sold to different target audiences. And this is not only visible in their exterior design, but also in their interior. Some cars might have a very utilitarian vibe, some others might feel contemporary, retro, elegant, practical, sporty, etc. And what's interesting about the automotive industry is that this is not only expressed by the product itself, but by every touch point that the user or the customer has with the brand, in digital experience as well as in physical places. A showroom is not just a white box with a car in it. It's very much a branded environment. So personality is important because people get passionate about personable products. And this goes beyond pure rationality, but it's still very real and tangible. Personality makes products distinctive, memorable, and irreplaceable. And so in a market that's flooded with alternatives and competitors, rebelling against the bland creates that bond between the person and the product or brand. So before I joined Hotjar, I was working at Aula, which is a startup building software for higher education. Aula is all about ease of use and community, which is a very big contrast from traditional competitors like Moodle. What you're seeing here is a visual with a new logo after a rebranding that I proposed for Aula. And what you're seeing on this other slide are some visuals from the previous branding. Now, there were many reasons why we wanted to move away from this. Like many young startups, Aula's visual language was very generic, based on material design and flat illustrations. And as Aula evolved as a company, we sort of outgrew it. There were problems with the color combination. For example, the purple and teal gave us very limited range for accessible combinations, and accessibility and inclusion should be important for everyone, but even more so in education, we really have to make sure that your product is accessible. And also the logo wasn't particularly legible, and so it was causing a problem when we wanted to expand to different markets. And the illustrations and the logo had also gone through many different uses, and so there was a lot of inconsistency in place. And this striking lady here, our users hated her, and her illustration in general. This was, in particular with her, the problem was that she appeared in empty states, and essentially users felt like Aula, the product, didn't care about them, because they were like, well, just whatever, empty state doesn't matter. So as we worked on the rebrand, we really thought, okay, we need a departure from this. We need to make sure that our illustration and our visual language takes care and really communicates the personality that we want, and we make the users feel like they should. So instead of going for stock illustrations or hoping that a designer in-house would be up to the task, we worked with an artist. And we did this after some serious reflection of what we wanted our brand to express. And this was a cross-functional effort between marketing, design, and company leadership. So the new illustrations, which are created in collaboration with the talented illustrator Francesco Fidani, show a diverse learning community exchanging ideas and knowledge in different ways. And so the result is a visual branding that fully expresses Aula's ways of being direct, optimistic, practical, conversational but not too informal, and friendly. And the illustrations are a big part of the rebrand. And together with the rest of the extensive brand guidelines, provided a clear direction for Aula's visual language moving forward. The shrugging lady was gone, nowhere to be found after this. And Aula's user base received the new branding very positively. So this rebranding teaches us something, that the value of visuals and personality goes beyond just looking good. And as designers, or more broadly as people working in tech, we have to understand how to communicate this. Because polished and distinctive visual designs can indeed increase or improve user experience, can make our product feel more reliable, trustworthy, appealing. And as a result, this can also improve the bottom line. It's fairly intuitive when you think about it. However, too many times we get stuck into needing hard data or numbers just to justify our decisions. And designers often struggle to quantify this, the benefits of visual designs in conversations with the teammates. So let's take a look at a couple of studies that give us some ideas on how we can actually quantify the value of good visual design. The first study is a study that was run by Larson and Picard by Microsoft and the MIT, and it's about relative subject duration. You might be familiar with this metric. It measures participants' perception of how long they've been performing a task. Now, the adage says that time flies when you're having fun. And so when people underestimate the amount of time they've been performing a task, it means that they've been enjoying a task. and the opposite is true. So this experiment consisted in providing the participants with a version of an e-magazine. Half of the participants were provided with a bad-looking poor typography version, and the other half was provided with a better-looking, with better typography version. Each of the participants was given brief instructions on how to use the magazine and was told that they were going to read for 20 minutes. The participants could choose to read anything from the magazine. Now, the participants were actually interrupted after 16 minutes, and they were asked how long they had been reading for, how long they thought they had been reading for. In the poor typography conditions, participants underestimated the time by 24 seconds, whereas in the better looking version, participants underestimated the time by 3 minutes and 18 seconds. So there is an underestimation in both, which means that overall the task of reading was fun and engaging. However, the greater underestimation in the better looking conditions means that in this case, the visual designer is responsible for the greater engagement during the reading task. And so a better looking product makes the UX better in a tangible, measurable way here. But do better visuals apply universally, or do we need to make sure that the personality of what we're designing is adapted based on the type of product and brand? So this second study is actually a study that I ran myself together with my colleague Rick Sobieszek. And we set up an experiment to get data about how different typefaces perform for different types of products. So we selected 4 typefaces. It was a transitional serif, Baskerville, a humanist sans, Fira, a grotesque sans, Helvetica, and a slab serif, Roboto Slab. And we selected 4 websites. So we applied the fonts to 4 different websites. The sites were for a bank, a news site, a fitness app, and a clothes shop. The study was a relatively simple survey. The participants were shown 4 versions of each site with the 4 different fonts. And they were asked which of the 4 versions appeared to be the most trustworthy, easy to use, and appealing. And they also had a not sure option. The study was done with a within subject survey. The order of the questions was randomized to avoid order effect. And 73 participants from 17 countries participated. Now, when we look at the results overall, consistently with previous studies in the field, the results say that visual design and typography do make a difference, which is measurable, and the 4 fonts perform differently. If we sum up the votes for trustworthy, we see that Baskerville has the best rate, with the other 3 fonts performing similarly, whereas for easy to use, it's the sans serif fonts that perform best, in particular Helvetica. And for appealing, again, it's the sans serif fonts, although this result in particular is not statistically significant, because as we see, the distance from the various performances isn't as large. Now, these numbers are somewhat fascinating, but they do not give an accurate description of what is actually happening. Because what is more interesting in this experiment compared to previous experiments in the past is that the performance of the fonts varies significantly between the different types of websites. So let's take a look at the 4 types. With the banking site, Baskerville appears to be the most trustworthy typeface. However, it's also the worst performing for easy to use. And Fira gets the most votes for both easy to use and appealing. For the news site, again, Baskerville is considered the most trustworthy, but this time it's also the most appealing. And Helvetica, in this case, gets the crown for being the easiest to use. And notice how Fira Sans is considered the least trustworthy for the news site. And now get ready for a surprise, because for the fitness app, Fira is actually the most trustworthy. And also the easiest to use, with Helvetica coming close, and the most appealing. Baskerville, in this case, is rated as the least trustworthy in this case. And finally, for the clothes shop, Helvetica is considered by far the easiest to use. It's also the most trustworthy and appealing. Roboto Lab, in this case, performs bad in every category. And once again, Baskerville is the least easy to use. So, of course, this study has some limitations. It's not based on real interactions. It was direct questions based on a direct comparison of design alternatives. So for, say, for a news site that wants to be easy to use, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Helvetica or Firasans, because many factors can come into play, including branding and visual design. But what this experiment really tells us is that visual design can really make a difference in the way that users experience the products that we design, and that each product is different. So expressing a personality that is specific to the product or brand has a measurable impact in how users perceive our product. The rules are not set in stone. Visual design and UX are sometimes closer than we think, and this should also influence the way we think about testing our products with users. So let's say that we get to a place where we all understand why personality is important, how we can measure the benefits of visual design. What are some obstacles that we will face? A lot of this has to do with design maturity. So you might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is not a design concept. This classifies the human needs. So from the most basic ones, which include food and rest, to the more to the ones at the top, which includes things more related about achieving one's full potential. As mentioned earlier when I was talking about how most processes in tech companies are essentially designed around the needs of engineering, and how much more mature typically engineering processes are compared to design processes, most product designers will find themselves in companies that need to tackle basic design needs. So if we want to run a parallel for design in tech, basic needs would be things like headcount, establishing fundamental processes for user research, establishing a basic design system. Whereas something like having a memorable and distinctive personality is probably in the upper part of this pyramid. But even designers who are lucky enough to work in companies that are more design mature will face a set of problems, just a different set of problems. So let's take a look at the two cases. Companies that have low design maturity typically do not have well-established processes for things like user research or ideation. And designers here tend to take care of basic things like improving UX at a basic level, making the product more consistent. They often even have to deal with multiple implementations of components or potentially no components at all. So as a result of this, designers in low design maturity companies do not see personality as a top priority just yet. It's sometimes seen as a luxury that they cannot afford, or in the worst cases, they have a misconception that letting designers express more personality in the product may lead to even more inconsistency. In this case, it's very important to highlight how having a more distinctive look and tone of voice can actually make the experience much more cohesive, not more inconsistent. In this early stage, a cohesive tone and look and personality has a huge impact in making the product feel more as one, as we've seen, for example, in the Aula example, where we moved away from the many inconsistent visual and illustrative styles to one cohesive branding. On the other hand, companies with high design maturity will have their foundations covered. They typically have someone, a person or a team even, dedicated to working on a design system and have established processes for ideation, research, etc. Designers in these type of company tend to see personality as a top priority. However, they also face some obstacles. These obstacles include that oftentimes if projects are framed as MVPs and experiments, it can be hard for designers to really focus on the craft and making things stand out. There can also be a disconnect from marketing, where the marketing team might be pushing for the brand to move a certain direction, and product is typically slower to react and implement those changes if the changes are implemented at all. And finally, enabling a large number of designers that could be spread across multiple tribes and squads, enabling all of them to collaborate on a design system is hard. It's a hard balance to find between enabling those contributions and making sure that the uses of the design systems are not only compliant, meaning they follow the guidelines, but also consistent across what people across the org are doing. So the problem is that too often in these cases, what ends up happening is that designers do not feel empowered to really explore the possibilities, and their curiosity kind of gets tucked away in favor of what's already available as components. We see this in large companies or companies that are mature. I've seen this happen at Hotjar, for example. In October 2021, just a month before I joined the company, Hotjar announced a big rebrand. These included visual elements like trace lines inspired by recordings, orbs inspired by heat maps, and a completely new illustration style. The marketing side got updated fairly quickly with these elements, matching the new brand identity. However, at the time, the product was lagging a little bit behind. The fonts and the main colors were updated quickly. However, there was still a disconnect between how plain the UI in the product was looking and the fully rebranded marketing website. So as I joined, I thought it would make sense to start bringing in some of the new visual elements like the new illustrations and some of the orbs, for example, in a subtle way, creating a more cohesive experience across the touch points and expressing a more distinctive character while still keeping the product functional. The designers generally were very much in favor of this, but had one concern. There was this question that kept coming up. And the question was, are we allowed to do this? Which I think is very dangerous, because we have to make sure that designers feel 100% empowered to experiment and to explore beyond the 5, 10, or 100 components that are in a design system or UI kit. If the designers are scared to detach a Figma component and explore possibilities that can benefit the users and the company, that's a dangerous place to be. We want designers to feel empowered to be able to take risks. And this problem is very common across large companies with established practices and companies that have a mature design system. See, for example, this quote from the wonderful Lauren Rice, who works on carbon design at IBM. She said, people can get really boxed in and thinking that all they can do is what is on the design system side. Other designers can decide for us in the design systems team things we can do. Design systems are never ending. There are constant enhancements to be made. The reason we are how we are is because what everyone else made. People's feedback has helped inform what we can do. We're not making the rules by ourselves, but it's hard to break out of that. So design systems teams really need to partner with brand, marketing, and the designers across the org to evolve the visual language in a way that is consistent and inspiring. We need to make sure that designers feel empowered to explore beyond the borders of a design system. And also we need to make sure that we have the processes in place to then make sure that there is that tight collaboration between who works directly on the design system and all of the other designers in the organization. And we need to be aware of this tendency to settle for what exists and help motivate other people to dig deeper and explore. And I see this even with design students. So I'm a mentor at Design Lab's UX Academy, so I interact one-on-one with students who are either new to design or they are already designers in some other fields and want to learn more about product design. And in their first projects, students tend to go for the really basic, straightforward, boring components and layouts. And what I do with them is to always go through some deep observation exercises where we look at examples of implemented UIs and products, which could be great products, it could be just whatever products, to really try and understand the rules, try and understand what decisions were made and why. And then after a while, gradually, after learning those rules, we learn how to break the rules. So it's about motivating people to go beyond the obvious. And typically, the students always get excited when they start exploring a little more and then start comparing their initial design with other things they've done. Now, we've talked about selling for what's available, which is particularly common in companies with mature practices. Systems, processes, data, they're all very helpful in informing as we design on the products we build. But too often we get too stuck over analyzing them that we forget that we are building products for humans. Now, I've worked with at a variety of companies, both large and small, mature and less mature. Common thread across all of them is that data is hard. We, as people in tech, often end up misinterpreting data coming from often misguided experiments. And we try to achieve goals and OKRs that were poorly set in the first place. And as we do this, we end up discrediting our human experience and intuition. We have to remember that we're building products for actual people who are going to use them. And we want them to have a great, positive, memorable experiences, which in turn will also make more money for the company. And so we end up too often not being able to see the forest for the trees. We're asked to achieve this company OKRs, but then also tribe OKRs and squad OKRs, and we end up working in silos. So we micro-optimize with many experiments, but it's important to keep in mind the big picture. Who are we designing for? What is the problem that we're solving for the user and the company? And how do we want the user to feel? An example of this is at Hotjar we use a third-party tool that makes it easy for our product marketers to launch in-app communications. For example, when a new feature is launched. And the performance of these individual communications is measured, and as you can imagine, each of these communications will lead to a spike in the adoption of the feature that was being promoted or whatever else was being promoted. But when you have multiple teams and sometimes multiple departments working on communicating with the users in similar ways but not fully aligned, this can get overwhelming for the user. And so we were starting getting qualitative feedback that it started to feel like rather than informing users, we were spamming them. However, the quantitative data from each of the experiments was positive. Feature adoption was up. We had to take a step back and really understand the big picture. So essentially, the data was good, but our intuition was telling us this was not good. And so one important point to make here is that alongside with visuals and UI, behavior, interaction, and content really have a strong effect on how a product's personality is expressed. Our content design team had set as an ideal, desirable tone of voice for Hotjar for the product to be empowering, efficient, and meaningful. However, creating all of this noise and communication was distracting our users. So it was expressing very much the opposite of what we wanted. So we realigned, again, with content marketing, design, product marketing, and product, on really the tone of voice that we wanted our product to express. And as a first step, a bit radical if you want, in this direction, we run an experiment where we disabled all in-app communications, in spite of how positive the data from the various experiments was. The result of the experiment was that, contrary to what we could have thought from previous experiments, disabling all of the communications led to a clear increase on the users who installed Hotjar on their websites, an increase in the number of heat maps and recordings and other insights viewed, and also a big increase in paid conversion. So what I want you to take from this is not to just blindly follow goals and short-sighted data, but to take a step back. Think about how the product makes our users feel and act based on that. Question whether the data that we have is really telling the truth, and think more about the big picture and the people that are actually using our products. And sometimes you'll be surprised by how often our human intuition is right. So we're approaching the end of the talk. We've covered a lot, from why bringing a more human element of personality in a product is important to some of the obstacles that we might face when we try to do that. What can we do moving forward? A shared sentiment across many of the designers I talked to about this is that designing UI in the age of design systems can feel like putting together Lego pieces. It's efficient, it's straightforward, it simplifies implementation. The problem is if designers start feel like they can only pull from their own Lego box. Or possibly worse, if they can only copy from material design or whatever other established design system exists. We have to make sure that designers are empowered to not only pull from the box, but also ask themselves, is this rectangular piece the best potential solution for this? Should I pull from a different box? Should I design a completely new Lego piece? And as we do this with governance and consistency in mind, this can definitely benefit the user and the company. Putting in other words, this is a bit like, we can kind of draw a parallel between design systems and recipes. They give us the guidelines and the ingredients, if you want, to create delicious, consistent products. However, if we follow always the same recipes with the same limited number of ingredients that we have in our pantry, we end up with products that just taste the same and lack flavor. So we need to try different spices, sauces, even add our own secret ingredients to make our products unique and appealing. And now this would not be 2023 if I didn't have at least one slide on AI. So what I want to say about this is that, like Photoshop and other design software in the past did, lower the barrier to entry to design, AI will do this even more. And so this can actually be an opportunity for designers. If AI can help non-designers to design those basic screens, this can, if we play our cards well, allow designers to really have more room and hopefully time to explore those unknowns, explore more possibilities, and so focus more on the human side of things and on exploration. So wrapping up, we live in this era where we aim for distilled, pure, rational digital products. However, more often than not, obstacles like rushed timelines, working in silos, governance, misinterpreting data, the feeling of not being allowed to explore make it so that instead of shipping these elegantly simple products, we end up with products that just look bland, generic, and forgettable. So this talk is an invitation and certainly a bit of a provocation to rebel against the bland and to move toward more personable designs. Let's reclaim those feelings of curiosity and exploration that too often we cannot even get close to. Let's detach that Figma component when it feels like we're compromising on a better experience. And let's reclaim the value of our intuition. Because in the end, our products are going to be used by real people who will appreciate an experience that is not only functional or easy to use, but also memorable. And so our products can be functional, as well as create delightful moments and emotional connection with the people who use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessio. Now time where you can ask questions. So if anyone on here has any questions, just raise your hand and we'll give you a mic. I'll add from my side that I really like the slide about Lego, which is very frequently misunderstood since Lego is basically rolling out new bricks designs every month.
Sure.
Any questions here? If not, then I'll
there's one there.
One? Okay, we have one here.
Thank you, that was very inspiring. I have maybe a bit provocative question. How do not go the other way? So how do you add personality but do not take away from usability? Because I think we all have seen sites or apps that have a lot of personality but are super difficult to use.
Mm-hmm. It's always a balance, and I think a lot of times we really have to ask ourselves what type of product we're designing. Some products will naturally be more suitable to have a very strong personality, so that's important. For example, if you want to pay your water bills, maybe you just want to get it done and never see that thing again. But if it's a product that you use often and gives more opportunity for personality, why not do that? And also one misconception is that every screen needs to be different or every component needs to be different. It's less about that, less about making, I have 5 checkboxes in my app and they're all different. But it's about creating this cohesive app, whatever product you're building, this cohesive experience that then makes sense from start to end.
Any other questions?
provocative question. What do you think about moving forward not by detaching components and rebelling against design systems, because somehow it sounded like that at the end, correct me if I'm wrong, but including in design system personality and richer experience by motion, with brand, and with patterns of that sort and guidelines on that sort.
Yeah, no, I think it's very that. We do not disagree at all. What I mean by detaching that Figma component is when you're exploring. A lot of times, I mean, it happens to me all the times, and a bunch of different companies it's happened, so I suppose it's a shared thing. But when you're designing a new screen, maybe you start from a screen that was already designed, and everything is locked into another layout, into a component, and it seems like you cannot move anything because otherwise the whole screen will explode. And so what ends up happening in those cases is that you feel like you're locked into that thing. And so you need that moment of, okay, let's actually scrap that just for a moment. Let's gain that freedom, but then it's that other part that I mentioned about governance and consistency. So there has to be that very tight collaboration of, okay, I'm exploring now, but then how do we make sure that we bring those learnings, those explorations to the team and to the design system team or just the other designers? So yeah, I think that is very important.
Totally agree. 100%.